Yeah.
Okay, so we are officially recording. Yay! Welcome. Spiel time. Welcome back to A Whole World of Love. You are
Yeah.
listening to or watching my new podcast, What's Your Medium? And this podcast is dedicated to all the creative channels in which we express ourselves, as well as, all the mediums that we explore. So today I'm honored to be joined by the wonderful Ora Kemp, who is out here as a yogi, a yoga teacher, a food artist, a creative healer, a civil rights advocate, a food disparity advocate, and just an all around incredible, well rounded, and colorful human being. So I'm so honored. Thank you, Ora, and welcome to A Whole World of Love.
I'm so happy to be here. This is great. I really am just super pumped to have this conversation. I mean, we've now known each other for years, just from being involved in the same community and being from like being in Montclair. You know, it's really nice to be able to have this conversation. I'm very much so looking forward to it. So thank you so much for having me here.
Yes,
Yeah.
me too. And it is nice because you're right. We have known each other for so long, and I've honored your spirit and your creativity and your workflow and everything you're doing as a human being so much. But I really haven't had the chance to sit down and ask you
Yeah.
questions or chat with you. So it really is an honor when I say that I mean
Yeah, it's
it.
it's overdue. I feel like, even now, whenever I come back to Montclair, you're one person that like every time I step foot in Montclair, I see in passing somewhere, and I'm like, hey, hey, like I feel like it happens every single time I'm in Montclair. You're that person. Yeah, so I'm definitely super excited to have this time to sit down and connect and get to talk about things in more detail.
Definitely. And if there's one place I always see you, it's at the farmers market, which is such a beautiful connection that we have with our love for food, our love for
Yeah.
gardening, as well as our love for yoga practices and spiritual practices and all the above. So we really have so much in common to delve into today. Um, and I'd like to start in the topic of food, but we're gonna like move through it as a metaphor. It's gonna be kind of
Okay.
fun.
Yeah.
So obviously, there are different elements that are needed to grow food and for life to be cultivated. So let's start at the the foundation, which is soil. So soil is where it all begins. It's the muck, it's the poop, it's the dirt, it's the worms and it's the ugly stuff that grows the beauties. So let's talk about soil in your life.
Right.
And
Mhm.
I truly am someone who maybe has understood my spiritual path through the understanding that we all have to grow out of soil. Um, or that growth is definitely more prosperous and lush out of soil in terms of spiritual growth. So, um, without digging too deep or going to a point that's too vulnerable, can you talk a little bit about your soil and what that foundation looks like for Aura?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I think we always come back to this belief that it's just soil that can nourish us, but when you look at the full, gamut of plants that exist within our ecosystems, you find that there are some that are actually harmed by water. They need things that are just dry and hot. Maybe they don't need so much soil, but they need more sand, or maybe they need more gravel or stone. I think a big part of what I would consider to be my foundation, right? So whatever that composition might look like, at sometimes in my life, I think it was a bit more wet and mucky, right? And then I realized I needed a little bit more air, right? And so I allowed myself to aerate a bit and I transitioned my foundation. I don't think I've ever been someone who's shy to that kind of change. I recognize that, a plant that can grow in every single kind of sediment or every single kind of foundation is an adaptable and prosperous plant. It's resilient to change. So when I think of what my soil is for me, no matter where I've lived, which I've lived a few different places, and no matter what environments I've been in, it always comes back to the ways that I nourish. So that's not just thinking of my own individual nourishment. And a lot of what we see it as now is a self care, but really it's care, it's maintenance, right? This need to constantly be connected. For me, that is directly to nature. So, in my home space, I always need to have it. I need to have very natural and organic relationships with people around me. I need time, like shared energy exchange. I need that. So, that I have found is to truly be like the soil, the nourishment that I need in order to flourish and grow is to be able to have these connections to things that are organic in nature. Um, and during like this time of COVID, when I've been inside of my own space and closed off a bit more, I've realized I'm not getting the nourishment that I need in my relationships. Like I keep bank of little things, like how long has it been since you've touched someone, like really like held them. Even now when you're around people that you like, for me, I live alone. I have my dogs, but I live alone. And even when I get to see like my very close friends, I still can't like wrap myself around them the way that I used to because of safety reasons, which is another kind of love, right? Respecting their space and their safety during this time. But I've had to love from a distance, which has felt almost depleting. And I found myself investing instead that time and energy in connecting with nature because that is something that I can have right now, right? So things like in my home space, I'm blessed to have a garden space with my apartment, and I had invested a lot of energy during this time into that. Just being able to kind of like sit out there, like just being a plant for a day and just like sitting out there and just being exposed to nature. Living in a space like New York City, there's a lot of concrete and not nearly enough of that just natural space. Like I miss seeing the sky and air so dark that when your eyes are wide open, you still can't see in front of you. And growing up in Kansas, I got that. I don't get that here. Even in Jersey, you get that if you know the right spots. Like
That's right.
you don't really get that here. So I find myself like really reaching out for those things to keep myself feeling grounded, feeling strongly rooted in my space. And then also finding alternative ways of being able to connect with people like this. Like I forget how much I enjoy being able to see someone's face when I talk to them.
Yes.
Hearing someone's voice. I'm like on the hunt now for a telephone, like a house phone. I want to be able to like call people and just like sit around with my house phone and talk to. And of course, I'm doing this because this is my phone still connected with the cord to like a rotary phone, which I don't know if you noticed, but when I went to dial the number, it was a rotary style because that's the kind of phone that I want. One where I can actually like hang up on people. That's the kind of phone that I want. But like having that, I really miss, I guess, feeling that like closeness, to people. So I'm allowing closeness to nature to kind of step into that space.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. And I definitely have been doing that as well. I picked these flowers for you from my garden.
Lovely. I've been loving like yellows and oranges recently, and I see that you have that beautiful yellow and beautiful orange, and they're they're lovely. Yeah, those are great.
Even though you can't touch them and smell them, I thought I ran out. I said, I have 5 minutes. I'm going to go pick some flowers for Ora.
I love that. Honestly, like flowers, I love living things, but like flowers especially are one of those things that, when I was a kid, was like, I know I've made it when I can buy myself flowers every single week, right? That was my thing. I was like, I want a different bouquet of flowers every single week. Um, and it's nice to be able to have like to bring that into your space. It's like a little bit of love for yourself, you know. I
It
love
is.
it.
Absolutely. And, so let's talk a little bit about having access to
Mm,
what we do. Because obviously, we're expressing like so much gratitude because we both are so blessed in terms of where we live and the ability to cultivate a garden and, you know, a, you said before, like in a lot of cities and a lot of inner city areas and in a lot of spaces in our country, there is really not access to even an area where that's possible. Maybe you don't even have a south facing window or a sunny window. So, for a lot of people, it might even be hard to grow an indoor plant. And then, like you said, it's hard to see the stars. Everything's kind of just
you're closed off.
old,
Yeah.
yeah, and closed off from that closeness. So obviously that doesn't close off the spirit. We are always connected, no matter how high you are in a building or where you are. There's always earth beneath you and always sky above you. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about that access. And, when I imagine a whole world of love, which I do every day, but when I imagine a world that I would be really proud to live in and that I would um, take a big breath knowing that I believed in it, that world looks like an interwoven um, essentially like I imagine the cities lush with nature and like the technology and the um, human establishment that we've created being in harmony with nature. So what do you think is like one thing that we can start to think about all together that's going to move us towards that kind of reality where every person has access to that?
Well, I think that there are I think that having a vision of a world that exists like that is really beautiful, and that it's this belief that we can't just have access to equal resources, but we can be so far past that we're actually now thinking of ways to improve just overall existence within space. That's a whole completely like that's a whole nother level from where people are right now. Um,
True.
and that is by design, right? Do you ever watch like any of the old like Star Trek shows and things like that? Okay, right. So at that point, when we are at the point where we have space stations in deep space, regulating quadrants within other galaxies, and we can travel where no man has gone before, and all of this stuff. Yeah, maybe then man will be elevated enough in their mindset to be able to say, we all exist on this planet, how can we make it better? And then think of integrating with nature, which is what we should be doing now. Like the issues that are existing in our world right now are truly at their root because of a disconnectedness between who we think we are and what we actually are, right? So I'm not saying what we are as like people. I mean what we are as creatures on this planet. We have created this existential crisis of our own existence by ignoring the fact that we are not above nature but within it, amongst it. We're an active part of it. And unfortunately, majority of our actions just by sheer existence are at constant detriment to our planet. Everything that we do, if we take from our planet but don't replenish, we are only causing harm to ourselves. The system is going to learn how to correct itself. It's going to correct itself. And we don't have the capacity to look that far or see that big of a challenge because we're too focused on what's in front of us right now. And again, that's by design. So hundreds of years of policy within our country has created the divides that we see within urban areas. The fact that massive highways cut directly through Black and brown neighborhoods is not an accident. It's because affluent neighborhoods that did not want that kind of traffic coming through their kids' playground decided to put it in somebody else's. All right. So this idea that we can, with our current systems and structures, solve hundreds of years of mismanagement of policy by just switching little things up or kind of trying to do something. We need to shake up the entire thing. We need to take this entire structure that has been built up by people, greedy people looking out for their own self-interest. We need to think instead with people at the center of this system and saying, how can we best benefit, bolster up, and support the individuals that are going to feed back into this system, right? Mm-hmm. So you see that in policy, you see that in economics, you see that in our climate status. When we actually start investing back into the systems that allow us to survive, we start to create sustainability. And that, I think, is the biggest idea that we can take from our existence on this planet. Is it's not just supposed to be here for us and what we can get out of it right now, but how can we sustain this system for as long as possible? How can we learn to work in harmony in this place of constant exchange of energy so that all of it can exist for longer? The problems that we see and the challenges that we see that keep us from being able to get to that vision of a world of love are ones that we have created, that we continue to put these restrictions on our even ability to dream of that as a possibility, because we're so blinded by our ego, because we're so blinded by our own greed. And the second that you step away from yourself and start to ask, like, what is best for all of us? What is best for our planet? What is best for our story over time? You start to realize it's less and less about what most people say are like their desires for existing in the world. And I think that's kind of why we have the problem, because it's only the people who think about themselves that are in places of power to make these decisions and keeping us from
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And to go off of that, yesterday I was talking on my Instagram a little bit about the little king theory and how there's this societal push for individuals and families, the nuclear family concept and all that kind of lives within the little king theory, which is essentially to create your own empire, look out for yourself, rise through the ladder of, you know, a lot of times exploitation and oppression in order to profit for yourself, hold on to that, and sit atop your mini throne. But the truth within that is that for the majority of people, that vision of having material wealth and material abundance without community abundance and without interaction that is genuine and equal exchange, like you're saying, whether that's with nature, whether that's with their neighbors, or whether that's with just anything outside of themselves, having an equal exchange. It really isn't even achievable. It's only achievable for a few people who have this greed problem and who have inherited corrupt wealth as well, and then put that towards more corrupt wealth, and now are continuing that cycle. But people, the average person who might still be in that little king mindset of like, well, I could be that person one day. And I wouldn't want someone to just take it all from me or to blame me because, you know, that's work, right? It's work like any other. But when a corporation is treated like a human being legally, not even just like in terms of expression, but legally treated like a human being, and then taxes, which I think is a fiscal representation of contribution, right? Community contribution in some way. those taxes are not required of
Mhm.
corporations, and we really do have this imbalance happen. So one thing that I like to focus on is weeding out corporatist apologist. What would you say? Like, like those arguments, like weeding that out and letting people know, like, what true abundance is and
Right.
what true success is. So, have you ever experienced in your life a pull towards that little king model? And if yes, like what pulled you out of that and what helped you balance that with um, maybe what your spirit knew was true?
Yeah, so I think yeah, I like this theory, this little king theory, because what it is it's the American mindset. We're a country of individuals. That is the freedom allotted to us in our Constitution. That if you step onto this ground, you are now a king. You're a king of
Yeah.
your own space. You're king of your home. That's why someone can come into your house, and if you don't want them there, you can shoot them, and you won't go to jail. You'd be like, "I told them to leave. They were trespassing." Like it is the mindset that you were at the top of the totem pole. Nobody can tell you what to do because you can do whatever you want in this country. And that's a freedom that, and oftentimes, like, if we if we were content with keeping our ideals within the four walls of our home and it didn't require us to interact with other people, that'd be fine. If you could actually be self-sufficient within your space and just do whatever you wanted all the time and believe you're right and stayed in your home, then that would be one thing. But we're a united states, right? We all got to work together, which means it's not about the individual. We can have
Right.
rights that allow us as individuals to be kings of our own home. But the second that your self righteousness starts to spill over onto condemning others into a life of less than, that's when it becomes the problem, right? And unfortunately, that's what our country was founded on. It wasn't this idea that we were going to bring these Negroes over and they were going to like become part of our society. And because they were building up and doing all of the work for us, they're going to feel some kind of intrinsic sense of value. And that's going to be enough for them because it was better than what they had over there. Like, that's not how any of that works, right? Because again, it's this idea that I, as king, know what's best. That life that they
Mm-hmm.
were living was nothing. They didn't want that. They want this life. This life is better because this life is contributing to something. But that something they were contributing to wasn't contributing to everybody.
Right.
So now we still continue to live within that same system and structure that, I know what's best. You know, even within spaces where there isn't a lot of power to be spread out amongst people, you still see that individual. Well, I want to do this and you can't tell me what to do. It's like, you're right. You have that right. We all grew up in that. I grew up with that. I grew up thinking I was hot shit. Like I grew up like I am just a fat, and I was a total dork, like, but I did things I did things because I wanted to do them. And it allowed me to do a lot of stuff that other women, other young black girls, other people of color, like were not getting opportunities to do because I was like, I want to do it. I'm going to do it. Now, I don't think that that would have been possible if I lived in other spaces or in other countries, or if I were brought up with that mindset that like if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. But it gets to a point where I think if you are listening to your gut, you start to realize that it's hard to silence a gut feeling. It's a conscious decision. Like, how many times can you look back and you were like, I remember my gut telling me I shouldn't have done it, and I had to make the conscious decision not to do it, right? You get to a point where your gut starts to come up and you're like, this doesn't feel quite right. Or you start asking questions. Anytime you start asking questions about something and somebody tries to get you to stop, it's probably because that gut feeling that you had is onto something. Keep pushing. I'm a very curious person by nature. So, I think growing up in a system that I realized something was wrong, but everybody was pretending like nothing ever happened. I'm like, this doesn't seem about right. And so I pushed.
Tell me
I
about it.
pushed where I could, and I sought out opportunities that I was told I couldn't do or I didn't have access to. And I was like, I'm going to push. Like, what are you going to do? Tell me no, right?
Yeah.
And when we start to look at how that impacts people within space, like if you come from a space where you are always trying to push for something more and you keep being told no, that has a detriment on your mindset, right? You're no longer a king, you're a peasant. Someone else is
Right.
king and you're being pushed down here, right? But for those that also are constantly pushing, when they know that it's inherently wrong, think about the effort that has to go into silencing your gut. Like, think of the thought that has to go into every single time you go to make a decision that you know is harming other people, what that must do to your soul. Like, what does that do to your energy every single time when you're like, you know what? I know that I want to build a resort. It's going to make me mad money. But I also have to run out, an entire group of indigenous people from their land that they've lived on for centuries. But I'll give them work under what they would get paid anywhere else. And maybe at the end of it, if this isn't a profitable venture for me, I'm just not going to pay them at all. Like, to be able to make decisions like that over and over and over again, that's a depletion of the soul. Like, that's past just making decisions about business. That is now putting the dollar above human lives. And the second that switch happens, there is nothing that you can tell someone other than you need to fill your cup. Like, you need to sit back and look at energetically what you were holding on to and ask yourself if the thing that you're chasing is ever going to fill the void that you are seeking. Like, you to hear, like, for Jeff Bezos has been making so much money during this pandemic. Okay. He could solve world hunger and still have money, like, and still have shmoney, not just like money, like shmoney, like more money. He could literally be the cartoon duck diving into the pool of change. You know what I'm saying? Like swimming around in it. He could literally do that every single day for the rest of his life and still solve global hunger. Right. But he's not going to.
Right.
Because he has a severe deficit in his soul. Like, there's just no reason for it. And I felt bad just not doing more for my neighborhood. I felt bad not giving back to my community. I didn't have the capacity to fund things or to go out here and change policy, but it's like I can do something from where I am right here. So yeah, man. And a lot of that comes back to like my yoga practice. Like so much of what I was feeling and struggling with externally about how the world worked and how I believed it should be were in such conflict that it didn't make sense to me until I started my yoga practice and it connected all those dots for me. And I recognized that it is not like the societal problems that we see are because we have a deficit of understanding what it means to be connected to one another. We've forgotten about that connection. We are so individualized that we believe that the little king is the most important thing that we can do, looking out for ourselves and putting ourselves at the top of the pyramid. We have forgotten what it takes to actually keep us collectively strong, to keep our cups full. Like, we're just running ourselves into the ground, and we're going to be the only ones that suffer for it.
Absolutely. And I've definitely also learned about my own direction in this regard through my yoga practice as well. And maybe I'm just the kind of person too who, like, the societal belief was there. It was implanted into me, but I was constantly fighting it. So
well,
it
because
was like
we're not inherently built that way.
Yeah, we don't fit into that box. And
Right.
so it takes effort, like you said, to turn down your intuition over and over. And a lot of kids are taught to do that. I was taught to do that, I'm sure, but I was also taught not to. And like
Right.
those were the those were the lessons I ended up chasing and reiterating to myself,
Right.
in my reparenting experience, in my self healing journey of like, okay, this is what I was dealt, this is what I was taught, but what do I want to reinforce to create really positive habits in my life where I'm actually going to make a positive impact, not only for myself, like stop hurting myself and getting in my own way, but really
Yeah.
how can I branch that out to um, finding that peace and that balance in terms of helping my community as well. So, I do think this is a big holdback for a lot of people in terms of service. And, you know, there is this kind of challenge with service that um, I remember facing it as a kid, like even just like picking up garbage on the highway and stuff, like just whatever ways I could serve, I was learning to serve as a kid. And I remember like the initial philosophical question of like, well, am I serving for myself or am I serving for others?
Right.
And like there really is this balance that can be achieved between like, of course it feels good to like be involved in your community. Yeah, it does feel good because you
Yeah.
see things growing, you see things improving. But there is a realness of like an offering or a participation that it's not always about an agenda. It's not always about how you look to the world, but it really is just about like your care as a gardener in your community.
Mhm.
So, obviously we're seeing a big influx of people having an interest. First, I would say in healing and like self healing and like self love. That was like coming up in the
Yeah.
past
In all
maybe
kinds of circles.
decade or
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. And now with like the explosion of the civil rights movement, the modern civil rights movement, it's like we have people not only turning inward and trying to do internal work, but now people collectively coming together and doing external work and coming together for collective causes. Um, so, in terms of that, if someone is still reluctant and if someone is still held back, whether that's by apprehension or fear or by the little king mindset or by some kind of, fissure within, do you have an offering of advice or some way to let people know that serving can be simpler than it seems?
Yeah. So, hmm, I think that we all have the innate desire to provide some kind of service. But I think a lot of times when people hear service, they mean like giving their time or giving their money. But service can be a lot of different things. And I think you have to find what it is that really speaks to you. So when I was going through my teacher training, so when I first came across the studio, I actually started volunteering there as a karma yogi, not so that I could get the free yoga classes, which was part of the exchange. You work 4 hours a week, you get to go to yoga for free. And that was great because I was a college student and I would love to be able to take yoga for free. That sounds awesome. Um, but I really started there because I didn't know anybody and I wanted to connect with my community. So for a year, I was a karma yogi and I never once stepped into a single class. I got to know all the teachers, I got to know all the students, I got to like be part of this community. And it wasn't until Lauren came to me and was like, "Hey, so I was looking and noticed you haven't taken a class yet." Like it wasn't until she came and like provided me that little nudge that I was like, "Oh right, this is my community and this is what brought the entire community together." Because what brings each person to their mat is completely different, right? Some people go to yoga because their doctor tells them they need to do some kind of physical activity. Some people go because they have an injury that they're trying to work through. Some people go because emotionally they feel strength after coming off the mat. Some people go just because of the physical, they want to feel stronger. Like, we all have these reasons that bring us to our mat, but once we're there, the work is the same, right? It's about allowing yourself in that time to be dedicated to something that is not about you individually. It's about the breath in the room. It's about how you guys can all hear a message, understand it, and move in that space together. And when you start to realize that how you handle things on your mat is how you handle things in the world, the idea of service changes. Because maybe it's not about carrying your breath, but it's about helping the person next to you, whether that is your neighbor or your coworker, or it's the person that you see at the deli. Like, maybe it's being able to provide them breath, right? So I work in food access. It's something that's very dear to me. I believe that food is a human right for all people. My place of service is in food. Like, I know it because I have a deeply embedded love and passion for it. And to see that there are still people in the land of abundance that cannot put food onto their table at night for their family, I find that to be like a crime of humanity. And there needs to be an assessment for many people on how it is that they can serve from that same space. So I know that, like, I don't have the time to prepare 100 meals and package them up and send them out. But I know that if I have that idea that this could be something that I know can benefit my community, I can help organize. I can create partnerships where I work with someone who does have the capacity to do that. I can tell them the value of providing this for my community, and then I can help to facilitate bringing the people that need it to the resource that's being provided. And maybe that is what my service can be. But I know there are a lot of people out there who have really great ideas on ways to serve their community because they're part of it. They're embedded in it because they give their time to it, because they allow themselves to exist collectively within that space. They know what is lacking, they know what is needed, but maybe they don't know how to get money to pay for it. Or maybe they don't know, organizations that are already doing work to bring that in, that just don't know that this community needs it. Which is why, like, if you're not involved in things like your community board, or if you're not involved in, if you don't go to any town halls, or if you don't go to just listen, or if you don't look at what policies are being passed in your neighborhood, if you're not able to do that, there still needs to be some way that people in the community are connected to understanding how things are changing. Because maybe your service is creating a community information board where you just send out, monthly newsletters to everybody in the neighborhood, like, these are the things that are happening, these are events that are going on, whatever it is. You find what your lane is, and then you find ways to give from that place of knowledge where you already exist, where you already have your group. It doesn't have to be reinvented. You just find ways to give a
Absolutely.
little more because you know that it would benefit your community in a way that's not being done right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm a huge advocate as well for, especially right now, where we're at in the modern civil rights movement. I'm a huge advocate for it's time to turn to our neighbors and our community because now we have collectively shared the information that does affect like everyone across the board in terms of like our whole country is facing these challenges.
Right.
But I do think there was like a period, maybe it was like a week or two, where people were like, okay, now what? And it's like, well, now you look right outside your door and
Yeah.
you look to see who's hurting there and who's experiencing these things we're talking about right here. So,
Right.
I am feeling really blessed to be able to attend the meetings in Montclair. And we actually have, I'm going to shout out this awesome group called Montclair Beyond Policing. They're an amazing group, youth started group that knows their damn facts. First of all, they spoke at the last town hall with our mayor, with our local leaders. They laid down those facts and they said this is unacceptable,
Absolutely.
especially for a town like Montclair that
Yeah.
prides ourselves on diversity, prides ourselves on equal opportunity, and then
Yeah.
the numbers just don't show that that's actually happening. It's I saw one stat and another stat. One said it was, one said it was 300% more likely. The other said it was, oh, I'm sorry. So it's 500% more likely for any Black person in Montclair to be a victim of police brutality. And it
Mhm.
is 300% more likely for a Black male who's facing mental illness to face police brutality in our town,
Right.
in my town where I live. And again, like for a town that prides itself on diversity and puts a lot of emphasis on culture and, um, all of these different aspects in terms of social aspects of integration and like representation, but then doesn't follow through on those numbers and make sure that the community is actually being invested in. So, that's the thing, like that was the agenda, is like
Right.
talking about how to change that now, today. And like
Right.
I want people at home to know that like these changes you're seeing, these issues you're seeing arise on Instagram or wherever you're seeing it, um, they're being they're actively being pursued
Right.
by people who care and who are coming together
Yeah.
and doing the work. So jump
Yeah.
on that, attend that local meeting, follow your local representatives, your local politicians, your local um, organizations that are doing that work. So you can know, even if it's at home, like the meeting we went to was on Zoom,
Yeah, I
right?
think a lot of things actually are much more accessible now because they're having to do them digitally. People aren't having to find childcare. They're not having to coordinate with their job. If it's like in a weird hour in the day, like they're still able to find the time to do these things because now they're digital. So I think that's actually a great suggestion. Definitely like to look into those the online and digital ways to become more engaged just in the conversation, even if it's just listening, like even if it's just listening
Yeah.
to the meeting so you know what's happening. I will say though, the I've always kind of had this love hate relationship with Montclair and the fact that it is so contradictory to the way that it promotes itself. And I when I was doing my graduate program at Montclair State in public health, I was working with a professor there that was looking at mobile food markets. So actually having like a farm stand on wheels. We tried it out with a couple of the senior centers around where the Pathmark used to be. So, right there on Bloomfield Avenue, near like Bloomfield and Grove, right? So
Hmm.
there's the big facility there where the Pathmark used to be. And you keep going down Bloomfield Ave, you end up getting to the Whole Foods. But there, on that corner, close to Bay Street Station, that is actually one of the largest groupings, clusterings of African American, Black and Brown folk in Montclair, New Jersey. And it's
Nice.
also where a lot of the senior housing is located, right? And when they raise the market value of that building and essentially priced out Pathmark for being able to be there, they closed the Pathmark without any other plan. So all of a sudden, everybody who lived in that neighborhood lost access to their closest grocery store. And their options were to go up to Whole Foods, where you can get half as much for twice as much, right? Or they would have to figure out an alternative route using public transit, which might not be a problem for some people until you see that there are only two buses that run through Montclair, and one just goes straight through Upper Montclair, also the most affluent part of town. So there's not really affordable grocery stores there. And the other one just runs into Verona or into Bloomfield. So you would essentially have to go like all the way into Bloomfield in order to get access to an affordable grocery store, right? Now, what if you were a senior? Like I said, that was the highest concentration of senior housing. If you're a senior, you are now so restricted from where you can get food from. Can you imagine a senior trying to go walk somewhere or taking a bus to another town to get groceries and then having to bring it all the way back because the one that they
Right.
just had in walking distance was closed? with
Right.
no other alternative. So we started this idea that maybe we could partner with the Montclair Historical Society. They have a 4-H program there. They grow produce. We could pair it with another farmer in New Jersey that could help supplement so we could have a robust offering. We figured out a way to be able to utilize, SNAP benefits and EBT benefits so they can pay with their card. The seniors farmers market nutrition checks that you get if you qualify for any of the other federally funded programs, we were able to accept those. We were going in and surveying people, and they were saying that the quality was better than they have seen anywhere else. The fact that we could pull up right out front, we could set up a time, they knew exactly when we were coming, so they were prepared. We do little recipes and things with them, all of this stuff. Like, we as a community ended up having to step in to provide it because of the oversight in the city when they closed it. They didn't even think about how that would impact the people who are there. And it's because the people who are there don't pay as much in taxes and property taxes and things as the people living in their mansions in Upper Montclair. Now,
Right.
if they had taken away the Whole Foods, that would have been a whole nother story,
Even
right?
though the people who are, wealthy in the town have the privilege of having a car, they'd be able to
They'd
travel,
be able
and
to. Exactly.
they'd still make a stink because it's just less convenient.
It's less
But to
convenient.
really know
Exactly.
that some people under that circumstance, I mean, that's food. Food is such an essential part of life. It's
Yes,
undeniable.
absolutely.
And, food, artificial scarcity is a huge issue that comes up as well. And what you're saying makes me think of it because the issue we have is not food production, but rather the supply lines, the connectivity of making sure there's access that is close to people's homes at all times. And that's why I do want to transition to your amazing new offering, which is Bodega Bites.
Ah,
Can you talk a little bit about what the
yeah.
Bodega Bites is
Yeah.
and how, how you came about the idea and how it's benefiting people?
Yeah, definitely. So it's still very new, and this actually came out of I was reading some food impact reports and some reports over the foodscape. So hunger is something that traditionally, when they measure it, it's done on an annual basis. So we're always essentially looking at numbers and hunger from the previous year. So during this time right now, when so many places have been closed, at the pantry, New York Common Pantry, where I work, we've actually seen an influx of a massive influx of new people coming into the pantry. And so that wave kind of continues. Like, we normally see a bit of a jump, especially around the summer months, and as it gets into fall, like getting closer to the holidays. But this has been like a steady influx of new people, and then we're still anticipating seeing a continued swell of people coming in, and it's because a lot of the resources that we once had available to us in our neighborhood has been altered in some way. And in reading some of these recent releases on, the foodscape and food access and how that's changed during this time, I came across a statistic that was saying that in the South Bronx specifically, which is where I live, that there's one grocery store for every 27 bodegas. And I mean, if you're not familiar with what a bodega is, think like your general corner store, like your general convenience store, not like a Dwayne Reed or Walgreens or anything like, not like a pharmacy, but think like a general store, like where your kids go just to buy candy. Like, and so when um, when I realized that, like, the thing that's in abundance here, right? If you were just to look at the food that's in abundance in our neighborhood, it's a lot of packaged food, processed foods, all these things. So my program, Live Healthy, is made up of two separate pillars. The first is the individual level factors, right? So my direct education team will go in and teach what we call public health nutrition. So it's the baseline level of understanding that the federal government says every single person in this country should have about food. But for every single person we come in contact with, this is the first time they're hearing a lot of this information. So things like how to read a food label, understanding the order of the ingredients on the food label is by how much of it there is in that product, or
Sure.
being able to understand like my plate and what that means, the visualization, or understanding like that certain foods in combination are actually better for your body to absorb it. And you start
Yes.
to get into some of these basic skills like this is how you hold a knife so you don't cut your fingers off. And this is the way that you should store herbs so they last longer. Like you start
Mhm.
to give them this baseline level of knowledge. That's individual level. You're giving them tools to go into their life and be more educated on how to take care of themselves. But if I'm telling somebody you need to be eating, 4 serving of veggies and 3 servings of fruit a day, and then I send them out into the world and they go to their bodega and they see plantain chips, they're like, it's a fruit. And so they grab that. Or, they'll see like, just candies and sweets and treats. Like what, how then are they supposed to even apply this information that I'm giving them in a real world setting?
Right.
And that's where
We
yeah, go
need
ahead.
to
Mhm.
decommodify
Right. Like,
food
how do we make it
access.
actually like the messages that we're telling them on how to take care of themselves are consistent
That's
with
right.
the resources we're making available. And that's where the other part of my team comes in, right? So I have my direct education team and then I have my policy systems and environments team. And what they do is they look at, okay, so this is what the foodscape in our neighborhood looks like. These are the things that are missing and this is how we're going to provide what we need to make what we're telling them possible. So one of the things that we did is we started a farm share at 2 of our community sites, working with local New York State producers and growers to bring food right into our community. It's a collective model that we partner with Corbin Hill Food Project. They have something called the Community Impact Share. So if you're someone who can pay in a little extra, it helps us to provide a discount for someone else in the neighborhood who maybe can't afford it. So it's
I
a
love
way for
that.
us to actually contribute collectively to bringing the food in because the traditional CSA model is not realistic for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like the people who live in my neighborhood, where the average household income for a family of 4 is $35,000. Like,
Right.
so you have to understand that, telling someone at the beginning of the season to pay $350 to a farmer to get food over the next 3 months, like that's not really
Right.
realistic. So we have this model that allows people to support each other. You're able to pay week to week. You can opt in or opt out. And because of
That's
the
great.
additional funding that we've been getting in, we've been funneling more into our farm share program. So we're now offering the farm share 4 weeks, 4 weeks of produce, massive produce shares for $20. And you can pay
Wow.
for the entire month up front, $20, and you get pickups every single week of fresh produce.
20
So
for the whole month. That
yeah,
is so good.
and it's like beautiful produce. I don't know if you saw the photo or the video that I posted on Bodega Bites. Um,
Yes.
but that was my farm share for the week. So
Wow.
I paid mine up front. I do the community impact share, so I pay a little extra so someone else can get it discounted. And you can opt in and out of that, like as your own financial situation might change. So you can also,
Right.
it's like a community pot that everybody can dip into when they need it. And I think when you start to take that stigma out of it as well, people are more willing to ask for support when they know that they can also offer it when they're in a place of stability. Uh,
Yeah.
so
Take a
it's
penny,
been
leave a penny. Take a farm share, leave a farm
exactly,
share.
exactly on a bigger scale, right? Yeah. And then, also being able to do things like looking at the community as a whole. We know that a lot of black and brown folks are living with pre-existing conditions that make them more vulnerable to harm if they were to contract COVID-19.
Yes.
So we understand the impact that food has on helping you live healthy. We have a program called our Food MD program where we actually partner with clinical sites and they help to refer patients who are either borderline diabetic or borderline hypertensive. They can come in and get nutrition education and free produce from us along with our pantry shares. So we're giving people food not to just help their food security, like making sure that they have food on their table, but the right kinds of it in abundance that also helps to build their immune system, that helps to keep them healthy, and hopefully helps them to stave off some of the detriment that comes during this time when we're all very fearful of getting sick. It's like the more you
Right.
can invest in your health, the more you can help to boost your own system, the healthier you
Exactly.
feel.
Yeah, that's my phrase recently is if we're going to talk about health, let's talk about health.
Like, that's a very public health thing of you to say, because everybody thinks of health as like, okay, what medicine? Like, everybody's crazy about this,
Reactionary.
getting like we got it. We have, what is it called? Vaccine. They want a
Right.
vaccine. Everybody needs to get a vaccine. We have to immunize people. We need the vaccine.
Right.
And I'm like, or you can just tell people like, what they need to eat to stay healthy, and let them know that like
Right.
the more you sweat and work out, like the healthier your lymphatic system, which
Right.
actually boosts your immunity, and the less stress that you have, like it's probably going to help you to stay this off. Like, we don't teach people
Facts.
the skills. Yeah, for preventative medicine, we like to put band-aids on
Exactly.
things. We don't like to fix the root cause. It takes a little bit more work,
Exactly.
but we're working on it. We'll get there.
Absolutely, but I am right there with you. I hear all of that, and I love how grounded your expressions are. I also love how you're able to serve so much, and yet you are clearly, serving yourself as well. And the world can tell because you just glow and your home glows. Um, Unfortunately, we're running low on time because I could literally talk to you forever, and you should
I think
definitely
that we
come
need
back
to have
on.
another. Yeah, we
We
just need
need
to
to
have
have
another.
another because I'm not even like halfway through all these things,
I
and
was
I
gonna
know
say, I
it's
was like, I think we
endless.
got through like 3 or 4
Yeah,
questions. There's so much more to discuss,
honestly.
so we can definitely do this again. Absolutely.
Definitely. There's so much more, but for now, everyone at home listening or watching, you can go to orakemp.com to check out everything that Ora is doing. Join her newsletter, follow her on her Instagram, the Bodega Bites, as well as her main page. That you can find all of that on her website. So go straight to orakemp.com. I will also be linking all of the organizations below and on my civil rights tab on my website so that you can contribute in any way that makes sense for you and your life in all these ways that we're talking about. And you can also head over to awholeworldoflove.com to join my email list and receive free meditations as well as civil rights call to actions every couple of weeks and connect with me. Read my story, as well as you can hire me to play on your record or hire me for a private group or couples creative healing session so that I, as an artist and a creative and a healer, can help you to serve yourself and also serve your community to the best of your creative vision. So thank you all so much for joining us in a whole world of love. This is What's Your Medium, my new podcast dedicated to creatives of all different mediums. It's been an honor, Ora Kemp. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Such a pleasure.